Some state lawmakers from right here in San Antonio want to force you to disclose what you paid for your home. They say this will make appraisals more accurate and lower your property taxes. The Bexar County Chief Appraiser agrees, and it sounds reasonable. But here's what they're not telling you. 31 of the 40 states that mandate sales price disclosure don't even use that information for appraisals. They know it doesn't make the process more accurate. So why would someone push so hard for sales price disclosure? Well, here's another interesting fact. Most states with sales price disclosure have real estate transfer taxes. Is that a coincidence? I don't know, but I do know we don't have transfer taxes in Texas yet. And I know I don't want more taxes. So if forcing people to reveal sales prices doesn't make appraisals more accurate and could actually lead to a transfer tax, why risk it?
Learn more at sanantoniofairtaxes.org. Legislative ad by the San Antonio Board of Realtors and Texas Association of Realtors for sanantoniofairtaxes.org.
In spring 2009, the San Antonio Board of Realtors conducted an advertising and public relations campaign. The significant thing about this campaign? It dealt with appraisal reform, the Texas Realtors' #1 legislative issue. Why San Antonio? The answer is simple. San Antonio is ground zero for those opposing our positions.
Bexar County is a hotspot because we have a few legislators in that area who are intent of filing sales price disclosure legislation.
In Bexar County, the chief appraiser had been leading a crusade against realtors for years. And during the early days of the 81st Texas legislature, 2 state lawmakers from San Antonio filed bills going for the quick fix, mandatory sales price disclosure. The San Antonio Board of Realtors saw this perfect storm brewing, and in late 2008 first approached the Texas Association of Realtors Issues Mobilization Committee for help.
When I hear the words issues mobilization, I think of local issues with a statewide impact. I think it's very important to know that when we're dealing with issues that could potentially impact the state level, we have to look at it from the perspective of the real estate industry as well as the standpoint of the consumer. Issues mobilization funds can make a huge difference. Texas realtors and the consumers can truly benefit from the impact that we have with issues mobilization funds.
The issue of sales price disclosure and the way that we decided to frame it, which is appraisal reform, is a very complex issue, not unlike most of the issues we deal with as Texas Realtors. To get consumers engaged in that issue and in our public policy agenda in general, it's critical to find a way to simplify issues like those and take a new approach to campaigns to get them involved. The anchor of our campaign was a website that we developed called sanantoniofairtaxes.org. And we chose that name very particularly. We actually based it on research that we did about what consumers would search for. And it really provided us the vehicle that we need to walk consumers through this process and to open up the message to them and to explain why it was complex and why appraisal reform is the right answer and not sales price disclosure.
One of the things that issues mobilization funding allowed us to do with the funds, we were able to conduct additional research that gave us information to better craft the message that we wanted to create to the member, to the public, and to our politicians. The additional research polled consumers in our area on what they knew about the property valuation process, the appeal process within the appraisal district, and even asked their opinion dealing with issues relative to mandatory sales price disclosure. So the additional research gave us the needed information and background knowledge to better craft the message that we wanted to create, the message that we wanted to send to the consumer.
We found out that 55% of respondents were actually in favor of the public disclosure of the actual selling prices on real estate. And we tested messages in that survey to find out if they were educated about the matter through a simulated campaign over the telephone, what might happen, and we lowered their support. But then we had to apply those messages in an actual campaign, and this campaign was conducted through radio.
A campaign that was targeted to the realtor membership, but also a campaign targeted to the consumer and our politicians to gain greater awareness of the 2 key legislative issues in our area called Issues MOB for appraisal reform and for the issue of mandatory sales price disclosure.
Sales price disclosure is a bad idea and not the answer, because what we have seen is many of our MLSs across the state who share sales information currently with appraisal districts don't use that information correctly. For example, we have found many examples of where sales price information indeed was provided to the appraisal district on residential property, but the appraisal district did not back out seller concessions. Many of our members know what seller concessions are. Certainly if you have a buyer who wants the seller to pay closing costs, for example, let's say $5,000, in a $100,000 home example that sells for $100,000, the information that gets shared with the appraisal district is $105,000, and that's the number that the appraisal district uses. So in this one small example, we already know that property is already overappraised by 5%. What happens next year is everyone is compared to that one single property, so everybody in the neighborhood gets a higher value just because the district misused sales information.
We also reached out to the media as a part of this campaign. They are a critical conduit to consumers in any Texas market, and also an audience that we really had to explain a complex issue to. So we did a news conference with San Antonio area media where they really got an opportunity to sit down and hear our side of the story, and out of that came several articles that drove traffic to our website and helped to educate consumers in San Antonio.
Well, I found two distinct findings regarding those that recalled the radio ad campaign and those that did not. Those that did not recall the radio campaign, even after we described the radio ad to them, said at about the same level, mid-50s, 56% in the post-test, that they were still supportive of the public disclosure of the actual selling price of real estate. But if somebody in the survey recalled that radio campaign and recalled the radio ad, they were more opposed to the public disclosure of the actual selling price of real estate, by 48% opposed to only 40% in favor.
Another critical audience for this campaign was our own Texas Realtors. What we realized is that it's just as important to educate our members as it is to educate consumers and the public. So we did that in this campaign as well, engaging our grassroots in addition to our top roots, and that's something that we hope to expand in the future.
Issues mobilization funding helped realtors and Texas consumers in three ways that we were able to utilize in the San Antonio-Bexar County area. Number one, it helped raise awareness of key legislative issues that impact our realtor membership as well as the consumer. This awareness was critical because not everyone agreed with the positions that we were taking on appraisal reform and mandatory sales price disclosure. So having and raising the awareness of these issues was a critical part of us using issues mobilization funding to help enhance and create that needed information. And number two, in the political arena, it really showed our politicians the strength of the realtor organization. The strength of the organization as it relates to our grassroots mobilization efforts. So important for the politicians to see that we have an interest in Texas politics and the effects of legislation across our great state. It also showed the legislators that we have a resource, an excellent resource and background information on key legislative issues that impact the realtor, the consumer, and their constituents. So from the political arena, it was a great educational tool. And the third benefit dealt with the issue of the consumer. We wanted the consumer to know that we had their best interest in mind. We want the consumer to know that we can be their ally. We want the consumer to know that we need to be their advocate in real estate matters. We can be the most credible, trustworthy real estate source for the consumer. And that's a benefit of what we had with using issues mobilization funds, to be the advocate, to be the ally for the consumer, and to strengthen that relationship with the consumer from that awareness standpoint.